Hey, Lioness, welcome to the show, Lioness Conversations, where we help women be brave, to lead with confidence and joy, and to find your path to the most meaningful work of your life. I'm your host, Jen Porter, leadership and empowerment coach for ambitious and heart centered women. Today, we have a very special guest, Sarah Greenwell. Sarah is the founder of Growth Mode Talent Partners, a boutique recruiting and consulting firm dedicated to helping startups scale through diverse and impactful hires. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jen. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you. I love what you do, and I can't wait for people to hear about it. Sarah and I, so you and I met through a growth group, through a mastermind. So you and I have a lot in common. We're all about growth for ourselves and helping other people scale and grow and have big impact in this world. We both have a recruiting background, and so we had a lot to connect about over that. So tell us a little bit about Growth Mode, Talent Partners. Like, what are you doing currently, and what are you really focused on?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with growing tech companies that need to scale their teams. So this can come in really any flavor of pre-IPO company, typically venture capital backed, some private equity backed, where I really shine is working with founders on some of those early hires. So companies that have 30 to 50 people, and maybe they're just branching out and starting to bring in their first product leader, their first marketing leader. So it's super exciting, and being able to get in that early and help them to add more women to their leadership team, to add leaders that bring perspective from growing up in an underrepresented group. I know this has a trickle down effect on the products we're using every day in our businesses and in our lives.
I can definitely see that. And to be in on the ground floor must be really exciting. How did you get into this?
Yeah. So my, I feel like my path has been windy, as many of ours have. So I will start way back when I started. Okay, I'll go even further back. So I was a musical theater major in school and realized that I probably would not be able to make a living doing that. So I switched to being an English major. I clearly had no guidance for anyone in these decisions. And so when I graduated college, I moved to New York City. I said, okay, I'm going to try being an actor. Ended up being a temp, ended up moving back home with my parents. I heard from a boy I was dating at the time about this new thing that had just come out called monster.com. So Monster, if anyone remembers this, was kind of the pioneer in being able to connect candidates with companies. So I put my resume up and I got a call for an insurance sales agent job at the Hartford.
Okay.
I knew nothing about insurance. All I knew was I needed a job. So I interviewed. For some reason. They hired me. For some reason, I ended up being really good at it. So I was selling auto insurance to AARP members. And my manager came to me one day and said, would you go to this job fair that they're holding tomorrow to try to help them hire more salespeople? And I said, sure. And I went, and it was the most fun I'd ever had at work. I was loving talking to people and telling them why the Hartford was so great. And the women I was with, I said, is this your job? Is this what you do? They're like, well, we're not at job fairs every day. Yeah, but we're recruiters. And I said, I want to be a recruiter. So I started going down to the HR office during my lunch breaks and before my work shift began, after, and just interned in the HR office until a recruiting role opened up. And then I switched over in that. So that was how I landed in it. Throughout my career, I have mostly been a recruiter at a number of different companies. So I went to a startup from the Hartford. So I went from 40,000 people down to a 200-person startup called Redbox, and then was recruited away from there by Saks Fifth Avenue. So I ran recruiting for all their central region stores. Then I went to Rockwell Automation, which again, giant global industrial automation company. And then ended my last stint leading global talent acquisition for a software company. So really, all of that combined is how I got the passion for everything that my business really is, which is recruiting, technology, startups, and I didn't weave this in, but specifically women in tech and helping to elevate
Yeah.
women as I'm recruiting.
It's interesting to hear you talk about how you fell into recruiting. Most people do fall
Yes.
into it.
Yes.
For me, it was a little similar. I'm remembering when I was graduating college, I went to the career services and they would help us, get interviews with companies.
Yeah.
And I remember interviewing with a woman who was representing a bank. And I remember at some point in the conversation, she asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, I kind of want to do what you're doing. It was something, it just like I never thought about it before, but to
Yeah.
interview people, I thought would be so fun. And I did start out in banking and sales, but then quickly, like you, moved into recruiting. And, that was my first career and I really loved it. And the other thing that I got was a lot of exposure to so many different kinds of industries, so many different types of companies. It sounds like you had a similar experience, which probably helps you connect with a lot of different people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think being in different industries, and then the different functions needed to
Mhm.
cover those different companies. And it's funny, and I see this now that I'm on the outside and working with a number of partners at the same time. Everyone feels what they're doing is so unique. And it certainly is. The product offering is unique. Every culture is unique, but there is so much more that everyone shares than I think they even realize. And that's one of the things I love to do if I'm working with, say, a consumer tech company. And, they want someone from Meta, they want someone from
Yeah.
Google. I will say, I know this amazing leader from this SaaS company. All they've done is B2B, but you're talking about a subscription in your product.
Mhm.
That's what SaaS companies are. They know this inside and out. And so being able to help to bridge that gap of, what we're doing,
Yeah.
we're the only ones that know how to do this is something I've definitely
Well,
seen through all.
yeah, because recruiting is matchmaking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So think back to when you were, let's say in your 20s or even maybe early 30s. Do
Yep.
you recall what your career aspirations were at that point? Did you have clear direction about where you wanted to take your career?
I just wanted to keep growing.
Mhm.
That was it. I went when I was at the Hartford, they did tuition reimbursement, which is amazing. So I went back and I got my master's in organizational leadership.
Okay.
And so got really, studied Robert Greenleaf and servant leadership and got just so um, fascinated with leaders and how impactful leaders, specifically within companies, are on the lives
Yeah.
of the people in the companies. And so, really had aspirations of not only being a leader, but being a great leader. And so, what can I do? I don't think I was ever like, I need to be a VP in 5 years, but it was, I want to lead from where I stand. I want to lead within my function. I want to be a leader that helps other people to enjoy work and feel fulfilled by it.
Well, I know one of your areas of passion is the intersection between health and career fulfillment.
Yes, yes. So I said my career is mostly in recruiting. So I took a little departure. Um,
Okay.
it was when I was working at Saks, and I had got 6 different stores. I was flying every week. I was on the road. I got it was probably one of the early days email marketing campaigns from Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and it was something like remember when you were a kid and your parents would call you in for dinner and you just wanted to keep playing. like, imagine if you had that as an adult. And that really resonated with me. And so I'm like, you know what? I have all this time on a plane. Why don't I just take these extra courses?
Okay.
And so I started taking the IAN health coach courses. And during it, decided I may want to do this for my job. So I was getting really passionate about health coaching. My husband, boyfriend at the time, and I started making these changes in our lives. But then he started getting really down. And I said, what is going on? He was a regional sales director, also for the Hartford. That's where we had met. He had all of Chicagoland for retirement plans, super successful. And he said, you're so excited about what you're doing. I hate what I do. It's just
Yeah.
not fulfilling. And I said, well, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And he just said, I'd open a coffee shop. And I said, okay, well, can you do that? And he said, I don't know. And then literally the next day came back to me with all these spreadsheets and ideas and said, okay, here's what we can do. We'll open a coffee shop. It'll be focused on health and wellness. It'll be organic. You'll have a complimentary health coaching practice. And we dreamt up this whole thing and decided to do it. We left the corporate world. We built a coffee shop, built a health coaching practice next door,
Wow.
um, and ran that for a couple of years until we both decided we were better as corporate people and went back to our previous lives.
And what happened from there for him? Because that was a big risk that you both took.
That
I know
was
where you've ended up, but what did he do next?
so how we ended up leaving, he got a call from his old manager and they were just, how's everything going? And he's like, we lived above the coffee shop. And he
Wow.
said, we never leave. We can't ever leave. We're waking up at 5 a.m. every day to bake muffins. People are not nice. We were starting to not like people, as anyone who's been in the service industry could probably
Yeah.
relate.
Yeah.
And his boss said, well, I've got Wisconsin open. I'd love to have you back. And so he asked me, and I said, sure, let's do it. So that's how I ended up at Rockwell in Milwaukee.
Okay.
We moved to Wisconsin, and he went back in the field.
You both were all in. I mean, you were living above the coffee shop.
Yes, yes, it was a lot. It was a lot. I think there's, and this happens. We get in our heads this idealized version of what something's going to be, and I think we were both like, it's going to be like Central Park, and we're going to be best friends with our customers, and it's
Yeah.
just going to be this great feeling. And then day to day, it's like, oh, we're out of cold cups, and the avocados aren't ripe yet, and you don't anticipate those things.
Yeah.
We've talked about it now that we're in our 40s, that if we attempted something like that again, we might be able to do it. Uh,
Mhm.
we had just gotten married when the coffee shop opened. We were in our 20s. We were used to, hanging out with friends at night. And
Yeah.
so our lives just so drastically changed overnight. It was hard.
So what I'm thinking about is you both took a risk and you realized after a couple years it isn't what you thought it would be, and so you shifted gears again. You did something different, and I think that's the sort of the thing that holds people back from pursuing the thing that they want is, will it work out? Is this going to be a big flop?
Mhm.
Not that yours was an intentional decision, but you learned things that it was like, this doesn't line up with how we want to actually live our lives. This isn't actually the intersection between health and career fulfillment that we thought it was going to
Yeah.
be. So, and we'll get to how you stepped into what you're doing now. But what advice would you give people who are considering making that leap and everything in them is talking, like their brain is like, protect, protect, protect. Do not do this. Do not take these leaps of faith.
Yes.
What would you say now that you're on the way other side of that?
Mhm.
You've lived a lot of life since then. What would you say?
Just go. Just do it. I all the time I imagine my life like a Pac-Man game. I'm chomp, 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 chomp. And if I hit a wall, switch direction, chomp, 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 chomp the other way.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is you hit that wall, whether it's say, this business isn't going the way I want it to be, or I'm not as happy as I thought I'd be, or any multitude of reasons where, there's some sort of wall you didn't anticipate. You can't stay there. The ghost is going to come get you. You need to turn moving and keep trying until you find that feels good to be in. And when it stops feeling good to be in, you got to move again.
Or at least ask yourself the questions, right?
Yes.
Get
Yes.
introspective. Like, what's going on? What is this? Because
Yes.
sometimes we think we need to exit or escape when really we just need to transform.
Well, and and this is what I loved about doing the holistic health work is even, I talk to just countless individuals every week about their jobs. And most of the time I'm interviewing for them for a new job. And I always say, what's the motivation? If you were to make a move, what would the motivation be? And what's important to you in this next step? And it's such an important question to ask yourself because, do you just want to make more money? Do you need more breathing room? Really figuring that out and then saying, okay, is where I've been putting all this stake into it really the right place to be looking?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm not happy at work, but maybe that's just because I've got so much else on my plate at home that what if, I had an honest conversation with my partner and asked them to step up more, or I invested in having a house cleaner come once a month, whatever it is, there's always a place you can look. And so, to clarify, it doesn't necessarily mean, I'm going to change the job because I'm unhappy in the job, but you've got to change
Something has to change.
Something has to change.
Yeah. And I want to talk about boundaries because you and I talked about this in a previous conversation, and I'm curious, what are you learning about boundaries? Because I think this can apply to everything and everyone.
Yes, great question. So I know I had sent to Jen, she had sent me a little form, and I'm like, I'm passionate about selective boundaries. And then she said, I've never heard that term. What does that mean? And I made it up. But thinking about it, I think it's more selective enforcement of boundaries. So here's the thing. I am not good at boundaries. And that realization kind of got me mad of seriously, this is another thing that I have to feel bad about. Like, aren't boundaries supposed to be helpful? But instead, it's just another thing. And I hear friends say this all the time. I hear other business owners say, I'm not great at boundaries. It's like we've just added something else to the list that we can feel bad about, right?
Yeah.
So I think what it is figuring out, okay, here, an example is I've decided I'm not going to be on Slack with any of my clients. It's too much. I get talked to in a certain way I don't really like. I prefer to have dialogue about searches. So I don't do Slack with any of my clients. I can have that as a boundary, but I have one client that I work with that I absolutely adore, and they're respectful and they respond with heart emojis to things. And so I'm on their Slack, and it's okay, and it's not something to feel bad about, like, oh God, I, said I wasn't going to do Slack with clients and now I'm on this Slack. It's what, I have a boundary if I don't do Slack with clients. And I'm on Slack with this one client that I adore.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that example. I'm also still thinking about the Pac-Man analogy because it's a really good one. My curiosity is, what characteristics do you have and does one have to have in order to be able to make those turns in Pac-Man when we hit a wall, and also hold those boundaries and be selective, be wise about which boundaries we hold and when. So what are the characteristics that we have to embody in order to work that way and live that way?
I think you have to be able to look inward and be really honest with yourself. And that's a hard thing to do. And it could be it you might feel uncomfortable doing it on your own. Maybe you have a really good friend that you trust completely. Maybe you journal, but you need to, when you're feeling this isn't working, whatever it is, you need to be able to say why and truthfully say why, not just why will I hate my job? All right, that may be so, but why do I hate my job?
Yeah.
And what are the pieces that can move around here to
Yeah.
help with that?
Yeah. When did you become aware of women in leadership roles and that being important?
Yeah. So it was really the move from the Hartford to Redbox. And so thinking about, so the Hartford is a giant financial services company. During the time I was there, and I gained so much, and I don't want to speak poorly of them, but run very much like in your head, you're probably imagining a financial services company running. So a lot of white men in charge, a lot of things done in a certain order, very slow. When I went to Redbox, I saw so many women leaders. I saw so many women at the table, and they were all incredible and smart and part of the conversation. And this was a company that was moving so fast and innovating. And I just saw all of these voices represented. Even beyond that, I mean, I was in Connecticut most of my life. That's where I grew up. It's a very white state, as was the Hartford where I worked, and going to Redbox in Chicago. I mean, there was ethnic diversity. There was just, I'd never seen it before. And
Hmm.
I saw how amazing it was for our product, for our people. And that's when I really just started. I hadn't even thought about it before. I just started noticing it. So then everywhere I went, really, I became a champion of that, of making sure that women at least were being brought into the mix of who we were considering for certain role types, and challenging things that were brought up, and saying, hey, let's change this wording on the job description so it doesn't say roll with the punches. Let's take away the sports analogies in these interview guides. Let's these little things that I think people weren't picking up on. Not novel right now, or I should say right now is a very tough time for for diversity. And I can't get into it too much because I get emotional about it. But up until, from when I started really noticing this up until very recently, there has been so much forward progress in this, and where companies are conscious of their verbiage and what they're presenting on their website, and of making sure there are women represented on their leadership team, and being held accountable to that by their boards and by their investors and stakeholders. So anyway, I'm sorry what I tangent there,
Well,
but
I'm just thinking that as a recruiter, you get to play a pretty critical role
yes.
in that.
Yes.
Eh,
Well, and so the story of Growth Mode, which until recently was called Her Move. So I want to honor Her Move as well in this conversation. So when I started Her Move in 2019, I was working for Bullhorn, which is a large software company. Also a wonderful place. Was leading a large global recruiting team there. And there were certain times where my team was just overloaded and we couldn't take on a search ourselves. Or anytime there was an executive level search, we would find a partner on the outside to help us with that.
mhm.
Every single time, all of the diversity actions, requirements that my team had just went out the window. Because these recruiters, they were just working with the hiring manager and just getting the hiring manager orders, here's what we're looking for, coming back with here's candidates that match what you're looking for. They weren't doing what I was doing. They weren't saying, hey, by the way, you're asking for 15 plus years of engineering leadership experience. There weren't women in engineering leadership until like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So let's widen that up. They weren't having those conversations, and we were mostly hiring white men for the most critical role in our company. So when I decided that it was time for me to leave, I just had my second child. I have three now. And I was commuting from Connecticut to Boston, staying overnight twice a week. I talked to my boss. She's still a very good friend of mine. And she said, well, what would you do if you weren't leading the recruiting team here? And I said, I would start my own recruiting business and I'd focus on women in leadership. And she said, okay, cool. When do you want to leave? Let's build up a ramp period for you. You do need to find your replacement.
Wow.
Got a 3-month runway to plan her move before I launched it. But I think it was kind of being backed into, I know this isn't working. I am, just missing my children, missing my 4-month-old baby. I am, working until midnight because I have a team in Australia. And so it's like, well, what would you do? And that was my answer. And that's
incredible to have. I think it's not common to have that kind of support right above you. Mm-hmm. Somebody that, in a sense, holds power because they're your manager. But I love when people have a special enough relationship where a leader truly wants their people to be successful and to do what they really want to do, where they're going to be able to thrive. So glad you had that.
It's amazing. And it's like I said, what I studied and understanding how important the right leader is. And yeah, her name's Kim. We had so much trust between us, and I like to think I was that type of leader for my team. I still keep in touch with all of them. But it's so important. It's all about leaders. And so that's why I love hiring leaders, bringing leaders into these companies that are shaping our world.
Okay. So I'm curious about the 3 months. Yeah. What did you do during those 3 months to set yourself up?
Good question. A lot of just writing. I still have my original notebook. It was what is this? What is my company focused on? Who am I going to work with? How much money can I anticipate making? I just, all these things. And then big question marks next to the things I didn't know.
Okay.
And then going and researching those things. So for instance, how much do recruiters charge? I knew I had contracts from every firm that we ever worked with. So I'm like, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to go check those out. And from that, determine, all right, what's my rate? From that, figure out, okay, knowing what I can handle, how many positions can I fill within, the first 8 months that were left in the year from when I was launching. And what does that mean? And then what are the things I need to get started? How much money do those things cost? So I had it all down until I realized, oh, I need clients. I need companies that are going to pay me, because that's great that I can fill 3 roles a month, but someone needs to want me to do that, right? So I started reaching out to people I've worked with, and that's why having worked so many places was really beneficial. Our previous CTO from Bullhorn, I had a great relationship with, Mark, and he had left and gone to another company. And it's called Boomtown. They're a real estate software company. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, Mark, I'm starting my own business. I'm launching April 1st. Do you have any role that you'd want me to help with? And he said, yes, let's set up a meeting. And I said, great. And so I sent him an invite for April 1st, kicked off my first search, and that was all I needed. I just need one client to get going, and I'll figure out the rest, and let's just jump into it.
Wow. And so what kind of challenges did you have to overcome in that first year or two?
So there were a few Few challenges right off the bat. I realized that I based everything off of being a contingent recruiter and I wasn't
Mm.
specific in what I was going to work on. So Mark, you know, of course, CTO, he had technical roles for me to work on. I'm a technical recruiter in my background. I enjoy working on those, but I hadn't set myself up as that. Um, Also, contingent recruitment, you only get paid if someone gets hired,
Mhm.
as you know, is pretty awful. So I had a couple other companies that, there's no risk to them, right? Like, sure, let's see if you can find us someone that our team isn't finding. And I would pour everything into sourcing and finding these incredible people and putting them through, and they'd get through the interview process. And I know, having been on the inside, that those are valuable data points. Even if they're not hiring the person, it's like, oh, they mentioned this. We didn't realize we needed this. And then they hire someone else, and then I get nothing. So I realized then, okay, I am not comfortable with this. I'm working really hard. I should get paid. And then I said, hey, I was an executive at my last company. I'm just going to call myself an executive recruiter. And I'm going to say I work retained. And
Mhm. Mhm.
started saying it, and no one had a problem with it. And so then I just went that direction.
It's a great business model.
Yes, it's much better. It's much better.
And so, what are some of the fears that were coming up for you in that the first few months for sure, but even across that first year?
Yes. Money, which I think is everyone's. So you asked about Matt. Matt is my husband.
Okay.
Matt has made other career pivots as well since. So he ended up leaving the world of selling retirement plans and becoming a general contractor.
Wow.
So restoring historic homes. He had started doing that a few months before I decided I was going to start my own business. So we had to have a lot of conversations about health insurance. We have two small kids and neither of us works for an employer. And how much money I can have coming in. Since he is a general contractor, he doesn't get paid a regular paycheck either. So
Mm.
really had to figure out, how much do we need? How can we utilize other forms to make this okay? And when do we have to call it, if we have to call it? And that meant I'd have to go back and work somewhere, if it didn't work. And so that was, I know that was scary, but it was also a really big driver for me because I didn't want that.
Yeah, yeah. And so, are you in? This was just your business? Did you have a co-founder or partners?
Just my business. I've brought in different contractors along the journey. I have so I have a woman, Shelly, that had worked for me at Rockwell Automation, that I knew was an amazing recruiter. I knew she was an adult and very trustworthy. And so when I decided that I was going to build out my team more, I had her and my friend Camille. I reached out to both of them. They were the only two on my list. And I said, I need to bring someone on the team. Here's what I'm thinking. Are you in? And Shelly said yes. So she was a 1099 contractor for me for about a year and a half. Then things got kind of scary in the venture capital world, and we weren't doing a ton of work. She went back in house, and then finally last year, I was able to bring her back as an employee. So now there's officially two of us, two employees of Growth Mode. And who knows? I hope to expand more within the coming year. But I also am constantly going back and forth on what's enough. Do you like,
Yeah.
this is good. I make a good living. I have freedom. I enjoy work. So why grow? And so and I have reasons in both columns, but that's kind of a constant tug for me.
I bet. And so, what for you is the intersection between health and career fulfillment now?
It's all comes down to owning my schedule. And when I have that control, which I did not have in-house anywhere, I block time for yoga once a week. I
Mm-hmm.
block time for a run every Tuesday and Thursday morning. I block no more meetings to pick my kids up from school. I make sure that I am putting the time in to take care of my mental health and my physical health. And it all comes down to being able to control my schedule.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that people want is freedom.
Mhm.
And it's really hard to carve that out when you're in-house.
It's so hard. And I see my mother in law just came to visit, and she's worked for the same company for over 40 years, which is incredible. It's another financial services company. She will be retiring within the coming year or so, which is great. But I looked at her calendar and she was telling me about it. It's meetings all day. It's like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's no time. There's no time for breathing in there. And I remember that. I've forgotten that
Mhm.
6 years
Yeah.
of my business, thankfully. But I remember being like, when am I actually going to get work done? It's just meetings all day.
Right. Yeah. It's a different world. It really is. And having that, the freedom of our, of making decisions about our schedule is just awesome. I mean, talk about the quality of life that shifts.
Yes, absolutely. And then with that accountability of, all right, I don't have the energy today. I'm just,
Mhm.
I'm going to take some time. I'm going to go for a walk and get a latte. And then because I'm doing that in the middle of the day, I'm going to log back on when my husband and I are sitting watching a show and do some sourcing because I
Yeah,
can't do that during the day. But I can make that decision, and that
that's
feels
right.
awesome.
So good. And tell us about what kinds of searches you're working on right now.
Yeah.
What's your sweet spot?
So my sweet spot is definitely product searches. So I love product leaders. I meet the most incredible people. I interviewed a woman recently who created the product for Walgreens for scheduling your COVID vaccine. And
Oh, wow.
it was like that needed to be rolled out in like 3 weeks. It would normally that's something that would be years worth of development. I interviewed the head of product for Bumble, so getting insight into dating applications and Fitbit and all these. I just love product leaders. It's
Okay.
fascinating. So I just wrapped up a search for a product leader for a mental health app, which was very cool. And having people that are really passionate about that was great. Meeting a lot of like-minded candidates. And then right now I'm working on a head of sales role for an e-commerce company. So little different. Motivations of sales leaders are definitely different, but I think that's why I pick out the good ones. Salespeople are interesting because if you're entirely money motivated, you don't become a leader. You stay the sales rep with the quota, you exceed it, you make doctor money, you go to President's Club in Aruba. But sales leaders, they like teaching, they like on their team. So that's what a little bit of what I'm working on.
How do you decide who you are going to work with? Because when you say clients, you're talking about the organization or the company.
Yes. Yep. So that good point. So yeah, I'm talking about the company. First, making sure it makes sense for my area of expertise.
Okay.
So things like consumer packaged goods, probably not good for me. I don't know a lot about supply chain. If it's a supply chain software company, then I can do it because then it's about the products people, the engineering people that drive it. So making sure the company makes sense. Um, and then the hiring manager, that's a really important relationship. Throughout my career, I've really developed awesome relationships with the hiring leaders. If they are not invested in the search, I don't want to work with them. And that's not a, being champion sort of thing and say, I am a partner that is going to bring you insights on the market. I'm going to talk to you about, what you really need versus what you think you need. We go deep, and I need a commitment from you. If I am talking to, if I'm giving you a leader from DoorDash and Grammarly that are excited and want to talk to you, I can't have a week go by before you get back to me.
Yeah.
No, that's not good for me. That's not good for you. So as long as it's a hiring leader that's, yes, let's do this, and open to different candidates, not set in, I have in my head, this is what this sales leader is going to be.
Right.
Because I'm going to bring you different types of people that have different backgrounds maybe than you originally thought. And I want you to at least see why this different perspective could be impactful for your team.
Yeah. And what makes the work so meaningful for you?
Yeah, it's the puzzle pieces. It's I work with a lot of different types of companies, as I said, different cultures. And I had a search recently that was the same title, but it was for one company that's a Series C B2B travel tech company, hustle culture. I mean, they will tell you you work 24/7. Everyone is working for the exit. That's what they're all like, I'm going to work myself to death over the next few years, but we have an exit then. I'm going to get paid $20 million and then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Another company that does home health aid software training. And they are very much about, the whole person. And this is a job, we love each other, but we know you have family. Work is not quote unquote family. We're looking for someone who's going to really pour themselves into what they do, but also have a life. And so I could look at the same candidate with the same skill set, but depending on who they are, they're going
Yeah.
to be a good fit for either this company or this company. That's simplifying it a bit. But I love being that person to figure that out.
And you're uncovering the motivation.
Yes. Yes. And placing people at companies, a lot of times, especially when it's the, Series A, Series B companies, they've never heard of. The home health software example, I met so many candidates that are like, this really hits home for me. I just had to set my mother up with home health aides, or,
Yes.
my father was a home health aide growing up, or whatever it is. And so it's like, amazing. They're going to bring so much heart to this job and be so invested in the end user. And they didn't even know this company existed. And the
Wow.
company didn't know this person existed. And they're going to just be so incredibly impactful in getting the product out in the world.
I can remember being on pins and needles waiting for the outcome of like critical interviews. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure it's exhilarating when you find out like it's a hire and they say yes and you've made this match.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that Are those the best days for
Those are
you?
the best days. I mean, it's so this business. I talk about this a lot with Shelly and with my friends that are in similar roles. Is it can go from like one conversation. It can go from you're super low, like I'm not finding anyone that is good for this. I need to. I have one conversation like, yes, this is the one. This is the person. Or the other way around, like I have this person doing their presentation today. If all goes well, we're making an offer. I'm so excited. Get an email like they bombed the presentation.
And
It's to connect. And it's like, oh, it's just so woo, 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 woo. But it's the ups. It's the ups that keep me going.
yeah, yeah. So what trends have you seen in female leadership over, say, the last decade, or even in the 5 or so 6 years that you've been doing this?
Yeah. So I've seen a couple trends across the board that I think then women in leadership fit into.
Hmm.
So one thing, and I'm happy it seems that this is turning around a bit now. during like the heyday of venture capital. Everyone's raising money. It's post COVID. Everyone is, can build their teams as much as they want. Started to really build out specializations. And that is where I really saw an emergence of more women in leadership stepping up. That maybe I think going back to when we are first hired, are maybe hired for more of a specific role, like a content specialist, for instance. During that time when there was so much expansion in hiring, there might be a director of content marketing. The last year and a half, that didn't exist. It was VP of marketing, and you have to handle content, you have to handle demand gen, you have to handle product.
Yeah.
I saw many more women being elevated when the focus wasn't on talent density. And so I have a few theories as to why that is. But I think what the last year has done, at least in the startup space, is really push women to go out and to learn other areas beyond maybe their specialty that they were brought up in. And I see that all the time. I'm interviewing product marketing leaders that started out doing demand, or they have, women are smart. We realize that if we want to get to a certain level,
Yeah.
we can't just be a specialist. Sometimes we can. 2022 we could. Right now, and possibly who knows how long, we can't. We need to understand all of it. And so I'm seeing that trending, I'd say, in women more so than men.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm all about the lioness. And I'm curious, when you are in your roar, and I define roar as, strength and courage and competence, and, we're doing what we're made for in our essence. What are you doing when you're in your roar?
So I have two different roars. So since we've been talking business, I'll go my I guess business side or professional side roar. So I joined an angel investing group last year here in Chicago called Josephine Collective, named after Josephine Cochran, who invented the first commercial dishwasher, unsung woman hero, innovator. And we invest in companies that are typically underinvested in. So think women founders, people of color, founders that typically don't get traditional venture capital.
Yeah.
And so that has been so wonderful to be a part of for so many reasons. I mean, we get pitches every month from all sorts of amazing innovators that just have these great ideas. And it's like, I want to invest in every single one. I can't. I'd love to. But you see how this could be so cool. And recruiting for these companies where so much of the offer package is on equity. And I'm so excited that the candidates, have this thing that could end up being a huge payout. I kind of think that. I know it's going to take a while, but the companies I'm investing in, like, these founders are going to, make millions. They're going to get their product out there, and then I'll get a little chunk of change from that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Wow. And then on the personal side?
Personal side, yes. So I have 3 young kids. I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. I love my family. I also have a fur baby, Wrigley. He's our dog. I still say puppy. He's 13. And there are moments, as any parent can relate to, where there's just so much. I mean, this week is a good example. We're coming up, a lot of schools have Friday off. Ours does for parent teacher conference. And then next Monday, President's Day, they're off. We've got Valentine's parties. My daughter is having her birthday party on Sunday. I just got a text that our, eye exam is next week. There's like, 1,000 things to manage. Yeah. And you can either let it bury you and be like, oh my God, there's too much, or you can step into the lioness and say, I got this. And how amazing am I, right? I'm running a business. I'm
Yeah.
scheduling the parent teacher conference. I'm ordering the piñata from Party City. Like, amazing. Let's do this.
It's such a different perspective because we can feel buried. A
Yes.
lot of women feel this mountain on our shoulders, and it really can be deflating and draining. I mean, talk about energy. And so really leaning in to say, I can solve for this. This is just, I can figure this out. I can lean in and step into this. Such a different perspective. So how do you take care of yourself when you're having that surge of energy?
That's a great question. um, it's in that. It's in celebrating any little thing, any little thing that gets checked off. It's like, all right, I did that.
Yeah.
We are good. And then just the regular maintenance of making sure I'm keeping myself healthy.
Yeah. I am with you on the celebration. I will celebrate the smallest of things because it's fuel,
Yes. Yes.
right?
You need
It's
it.
good for our soul. It's good for our mind and body to recognize, like, I am celebrating that I did that thing. And a lot of times for me, it's the things that are hard,
Yeah.
right? The things that take courage or are just extremely tedious but important.
Mhm.
And getting those things done, I will celebrate. And
Yes.
of course, I celebrate
You
all
should.
my clients,
Yes, and you should
friends.
celebrate those. We need to more. I was thinking about one of the questions you had sent me was about being brave. And like, I think we put brave as this, like, I've done something, monumental. I'm
Mm,
brave. But brave comes from just, doing the thing, from saying,
yeah.
from getting out of bed, from, taking your shower. I mean, there's so much that we do.
Showing up for your daily life.
Yes, like all the adulting stuff where it's brave that I am just like, I'm doing this, I'm living this life, and I keep going.
You are. It's beautiful. I love it.
You are.
Thank you. It's an honor. It is very fueling for me to do this work. I have found that intersection between health and career fulfillment. This is my great joy to get to do this work and to raise up, elevate other lionesses and help women see themselves as a lioness
Yes.
because they're doing incredible things.
Yes. I did yoga this morning, a video because it's snowing here in Chicago and it's too cold. But she said to pick one word for today that you're going to meditate on throughout your practice, and I picked lioness because we were doing it.
Awesome. I love it. And I just learned recently from a yoga therapist that there is the lion's roar.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So funny story about that. One of my clients that is not an ideal client, the founder CEO is just awful to work with. I mean, really talks over you and swears and like just I shrink when I'm with him. I
Hmm.
be with other people and engage in dialogue, and I'm not afraid to give my opinion. But with him, I just shrink. And one of my friends who's in healing arts said, just do lion pose before before your meeting with him. Just take up space in your room and um,
Right.
and
Right.
I did, and I had a better meeting with him. So it won't heal
Yeah.
him, but it'll help.
It'll help you show up different.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Wow. Yeah, I do a lot of work helping women find their voice.
Yes.
And that's such a representation of our voice, the power that we hold within us.
Yes.
So, Sarah, how can people find you and how should people think about you when they are reaching out?
Yes. One of my boundaries is I'm not on most social media. The only thing I'm on is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And that is out of pure necessity because I'm a recruiter.
Yeah.
So people can find me on LinkedIn. My website is growthmode.partners. I am being really much more so than I have been intentional about who I'm working with this year, the companies I'm
Mhm.
working with. I have three things up on my whiteboard here. I have great leaders, interesting products, doing good in the world.
Yes.
So if if anyone listening is a hiring leader at a company, is an executive, or knows someone who is, and it's a great company to work for. If it's a woman founder or CEO, I love that.
Yeah.
But really a place where I would feel good bringing incredible humans to come be a part of that team.
Awesome. So connect with Sarah on LinkedIn, and it's growthmode.partners.com, right? Is
Just growthmode.partners.
growthmode.partners. Okay, so Sarah, thank you so much for being here, sharing. Thank you for roaring in your ways that are so important to your family, to the world, and to the leaders that you're matchmaking into these incredible companies. And I hope people will reach out if they know of startups maybe that are run by
Yeah.
women founders who want to scale and need some incredible talent to do that. Think of Sarah. So thank you so much. And until the next episode, the lioness in me sees the lioness in you.